Chair Hertz, members of the committee, my name is Keegan Medrano, that's Medrano, and I am here representing the American Civil Liberties Union of Montana, based in Missoula, Montana. We urge a yes vote on SB 119 to expand temporary property tax exemption for tribal members within reservations during an individual's pending fee to trust application process. This body is considering scores of efforts to accredit, reduce, or make exempt entirely property taxes for Montanans based on age, class, and other factors. With SB 119, you have the opportunity to empower tribal members who own their land in fee by alleviating property taxes in narrow instances, thereby empowering the individual during this costly, time-consuming, but vitally important 16-step process, which is one of the most complex land conveyances conducted. Taking land in fee to trust provides exciting opportunities and multiple benefits for the community, including, but not limited to, housing, hunting, and fishing, and other culturally significant practices and places, while also beginning the process of redressing allotment and fractionation, which has created so many issues and shattered our land bases and relationships to each other and the earth. Allotment, the federal government's imposed policy from 1887 to 1934, contrived to assimilate individual tribal members by stripping them of their interests, their practices, and their agency, and in turn forced them to become farmers and ranchers. Allotment, it was believed, would turn Indians into American-style farmers, open up additional lands deemed surplus for white settlement, and ultimately bring an end to tribal nations. And while tribal lands were whittled down by over 65%, from 138 million acres to 48 million acres, we are still here, our nations are still here, left to pick up the pieces of this failed big government policy. And while we might be encroaching on nearly 90 years since the repudiation of this devastating policy, reservations within the United States and in Montana experience checkerboard ownership, whether it's fee or trust or non-member or member or tribally owned, and fractionation, where those individually allotted lands to tribal members continue to splinter and granulate with every generation's increasing heirs. With every passing moment, fractionation's damage intensifies, creating widespread issues within reservations that make it difficult to pursue economic development, infrastructure, access to sacred sites and cultural sites, and ultimately the land becomes financially inconsequential for individual owners of lease income. Fee to trust, emboldened by SB 119, could begin to restore the land in our communities by empowering individual tribal members to seize the self-determination era we are in. We can empower our nations as we stitch ourselves back together from the damage of the federal government's policy. We ask, do you want to be the government that reduces this barrier, that rids us of this inhibitive tax, and allows us to put the pieces back together? Please vote yes on SB 119. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further proponents in the room? So, Christy, it looks like we have a couple online, so you could do.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I first have Jade Bahr ready for comment.
Good morning, Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jade Bahr, B-A-H-R, and I'm here on behalf of the Montana Budget and Policy Center. We rise in support of this bill and recognize it as a cleanup bill and an easy do pass. We believe the bill before us supports the sovereign right of tribal citizens seeking to put their fee land back into trust. I would like to first provide the committee with some context as to why the fee to trust process can take place, and I'll begin by briefly explaining what others have already touched on, but it might be considered one of the most devastating policy pieces to hit tribal nations across the country, and that was the Dawes Act of 1887, or it is sometimes referred to as the General Allotment Act. So this act allowed the U.S. government to overexert its control and allot land to non-Indians within reservation boundaries. And by the end of this act, nearly 2/3 of reservation lands nationwide had passed out of trust. So today we see tribal nations and their members attempting to restore trust land. The Fort Peck Reservation only has 46% of its reservations lands in trust. And the last I checked the Department of Revenue's number of tribal exemption applications that were in process, it said that 39 of those parcels requests were coming from the Fort Peck Reservation. Now, when land is held in trust, it means that the U.S. government holds trust responsibility for that land, which I guess you could say essentially makes the U.S. a sort of banker and guardian to protect those trust lands as per agreement of treaties. Now, in regards to treaties recognize the sovereign status of a tribal nation and form what the U.S. Constitution refers to as the supreme law of the land. And so I got to give it to some of our immigrant forefathers who entered into these treaties with tribal nations because they appeared to hold a profound legal respect for the sovereign status of tribes prior to immigrant ancestors arriving to these lands. And I would very much expect the same level of respect in today's era. So for those who might be a little unfamiliar with tribal sovereign status, it means that tribal nations retain the power of self-government with respect to their lands and their members. Tribal sovereignty is not qualitatively different from sovereignty exercised by the state and federal government. However, the states and the federal government derive their sovereignty from the U.S. Constitution, whereas tribal governments exercise their inherent sovereignty that existed before the founding of the United States. And again, this bill would fix the statute to allow tribal citizens the property tax exemption during the fee to land trust process. And when land is held in trust, it not only helps restore tribal sovereignty, but it can open up access to federal programs, services to tribal nations like housing, energy development, and a protection of cultural resources. So again, we see this as an easy do pass, and I hope you can too. Thank you.
Thank you.